I uh I had a cool experience. I connected with a buddy of mine that was a ranger. He was in one of the ranger battalions. He's one of the best operators I know. We didn't get a chance to spend time on the battlefield, but I know his reputation and who he is out in the world. And we were kind of reminiscing about our days, obviously in the military, but kind of talking about the experience. And we got onto ranger school. Hats off, and shout out to the rangers in the world. There's traditions in the military that I think are just epic. They've just been around forever, and some of them are so simple. At ranger school, or anybody that's a ranger, if you're on a military base, particularly an army base where there are rangers, the Rangers kind of have a quote that is Rangers lead the way. Rangers lead the way. And so if somebody is saluting each other on a base that has Rangers, let's say a senior officer is saluting maybe enlisted guy, the enlisted guy might say, instead of how you doing this today, sir, he'd say Rangers lead the way. The response is all the way. So Rangers lead the way, all the way. It's just good stuff. I love traditions like that. But when I was at Ranger School, as we were sharing stories back and forth, he was actually telling me a story that he learned this kind of neat technique or tactic from a SEAL. And then he said, what'd you learn from your time, with the Rangers and in the Ranger battalions? I said, I actually learned one of the best leadership lessons I ever learned from the Army at Ranger School. And this is what that lesson was. When you're at Ranger School, you're constantly running these kind of like simulated combat operations in the mountains of Georgia, and then you're in the swamps of Florida and moving around all this different terrain, running these combat operations, all simulated, but unbelievable targets to hit, helicopters and bad guys everywhere doing the job to make it tough on you. So it's a great course. But you're being evaluated as you're going through those combat operations by the Ranger instructor. So a Ranger instructor is either an Army guy, there's Marines, there's different services that become instructors, mostly Army, but they're evaluating when you're the platoon leader, maybe the platoon second in command, maybe you're in charge of building one of the models for kind of a target assault and doing that. But there's only a couple gradable positions when you're actually under the magnifying scope and being evaluated whether you're going to get a green, which means you move on to the next phase of training, or a red, which means you get recycled and don't get to move on to the next round of training. But you don't know what your score is. The Ranger instructors are not there giving you, guidance, feedback, mentorship. They basically just watch. They're very standoffish. It's sort of creepy, to be honest. But I remember I'm in charge of a patrol. There's a ranger. You're not even a name at Ranger School. You're a number. That you just be sitting there minding your own business. All of a sudden they'd say, "Hey, Ranger 82," and you're like, "Oh, that's me. Get up here. You're in charge of the patrol." So I take over this patrol, and we're moving along doing our thing. And unbeknownst to me, there's a Ranger instructor kind of watching what's going on. But on the patrol, we're moving through the kind of countryside or through the target area. And one of the very basic things about military service and tactics in the field is that job of just how you move from point A to point B. And there's a lot of things that do that. The number of people that are in your combat unit, weather, enemy disposition, all kinds of things bear on that. Almost nothing more than the terrain. So if you're in open desert, the distance between you and the person in front of you could be 25 yards because you don't want to be able to have an enemy put an attack on you and get you all in one spot. If you're in triple canopy jungle so thick you can't even see the person in front of you, you might be touching the person in front of you so you don't break contact and you stay together. Urban terrain calls for a little bit of both, sometimes spread out, sometimes tight. But as you're on a patrol, if patrolling is kind of the basic thing we do in the military, the most elemental piece of patrolling is when a patrol stops, because they're constantly starting and stopping. Usually my enlisted buddies will love this because the officer's lost. But when they stop, you don't want to be the tallest thing on the battlefield. So when a patrol stops, you want to get down into a fighting position. Now, I knew this from my time in SEAL training because I'd just gotten there from SEAL training. So we're on this patrol. The patrol stops. I just take a knee. I get down in a fighting position with my gun, and all of a sudden, this deep booming, like James Earl Jones type voice comes booming out of the darkness and says, "Ranger 82, freeze right where you're at." And now I'm like, this is not good. I definitely made a mistake. He's like, "All the Rangers of Bravo Company, bring it in, circle around Ranger 82. And I'm like, oh, I'm in big trouble. This is where they hit you in the back of the head with a shovel. I'm the only guy with a Navy name tape in this course. I'm definitely going to hole. This is how it ends. Gets everybody in. He says, "Ranger 82, I like the way when this patrol stopped, you got down to fighting position. He actually turns the whole group. He's like, hey, it bothers me that the only person that got himself into fighting shape was the Navy guy when this patrol stopped. And now I'm feeling a little bit better about myself. And he says, Ranger 82, you got down. However, did you fail to realize that not 10 feet in front of where you took a knee is an enormous pine tree? And had you got yourself up into that, got your gun behind that, you'd be in a defendable, good position to prosecute a fight. And I said, Hua, which is the only response you can give in Ranger School. And he says, Ranger 82, I want you to remember something. Constantly improve your position. Constantly improve your position on the battlefield. And I say, Hua, I get up, we carry on. Now, it's probably a week later. It's right before we're going to leave this phase of training. You rarely see the same Ranger instructor at the same time or on the same patrol. They're constantly moving. But we're on a patrol. The patrol stops. I take a knee. I see a tree. I go scooting out of that tree and get my gun up, and inexplicably, that unmistakable voice says, Ranger 82, freeze right where you're at. And he says, everybody bring it in, circle 82. And I'm like, yes. This is what they give medals for. There's no doubt in my mind. And he says, Ranger 82, I see that you took a knee. I saw you work out and get up on that tree. And I was like, showered on me. Come on. And he says, did you fail to realize that not 10 feet past that tree you stopped at is an enormous granite rock outcropping? And had you got behind that, you'd probably survive a nuclear blast. You're not that good at this job. It was crushing. It was crushing that I, in my mind, kind of failed the directive. What was cool was he spread everybody back out, and then he took a knee next to me. He said, hey, I told you to constantly improve your position. You did what I said. You failed to learn the lesson. I said constantly improve your position. That means if you are in the middle of a field and there is one rock you can get behind, you get behind that. If you're in urban terrain, you use a building. If there's a wall, a fence, anything you can use, high ground, to improve your or your team's position, you do it. And you have to constantly be looking for that. And I said, Hua, and carried on. The cool thing about this is this has served me so well for the rest of my career. There was never a time in a fight I wasn't constantly looking for a better place to put my team in a good position to prosecute that mission and take advantage. The better part was it proved to be a better leadership and life lesson. I really do think in terms constantly of how can I improve my position. I mean, I'm telling you right now, if your family and my family are at Disneyland, I am gaming the system on how I can get to the front of that line, get a quicker line to the next ride, or figure out a way to get my kid to meet Alice in Wonderland and get that picture. It's really a simple concept, but one that will carry you far. Think in terms of how can you put yourself in a better position? How can you put your team in a better position? How can you put your family in a better position to succeed? Constantly improve your position. Ever onward.